The ticking of Attorney Wallace's mahogany desk clock feels like a hammer against my skull. Each second pounds another nail into the coffin of what I thought my life was. I sit alone in the leather chair that's too firm to offer any comfort, my fingernails pressing half-moons into my palms. I'll read the relevant section again, Miss Cantwell. Wallace clears his throat, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose like a bird ready to take flight. To our daughter Hallie, we leave our entire estate, including the family home at 1423 Maple Street, all financial accounts, and personal property therein. My lips part, but no sound emerges. 3 weeks. Just 3 weeks since I watched them lower my parents into the ground. 3 weeks of comforting Hallie, arranging the memorial service, sorting through condolence cards, and fielding casseroles from neighbors who murmured how brave I was being. And to Nerisse? I finally manage my voice, a stranger's monocar. Wallace slides a sealed envelope across the desk. They left this for you. My hands tremble as I break the seal, the paper vibrating like autumn leaves in a storm. My mother's handwriting flows across the page in familiar blue ink. You've always been strong. She needs this more. You're already stable. Please, one last act of sacrifice. I look up, vision blurring. I don't understand. I raised her. I was there when they weren't. Wallace shuffles papers, avoiding my eyes. The room tilts sideways as a memory floods in uninvited. Me at 14, dragging myself from bed at 3 a.m. to the sound of Hallie's hungry cries. The bottles I warmed while my parents worked night shifts at the hospital. The schoolwork pushed aside because, you're so good with her, Nerisse. She needs you more than school does right now. College applications completed, but never mailed because Hallie had separation anxiety. Scholarship opportunities dissolving like sugar in rain. My parents' grateful smiles as I deferred my education year after year, becoming the stable foundation they could build their careers upon. Your parents felt very strongly about this arrangement, Wallace says, tapping his pen against a document requiring my signature. They thought you'd understand. I rise from the chair, my legs wooden, but my spine suddenly steel. The clock continues its relentless ticking, counting down the seconds of a life I no longer recognize. I've understood enough, I say, my voice steadier than the hands I clasp together to hide their shaking. A single tear escapes down my cheek, but I don't brush it away. Let him see it. Let him remember it. I'll need some time. Wallace stands, extending the papers. We should complete the acknowledgement today, if possible. I look at the forms, at the letter, with its cruel request for one last sacrifice, at the pen, waiting for me to once again be the good daughter who puts everyone else first. I turn and walk toward the door. Miss Cantwell, you've forgotten the letter. Wallace calls after me. No, I say without turning back. I haven't forgotten anything. The evening brings 6 calls from Hallie. Each time, my phone vibrates against the coffee table in Sandra's apartment where I've temporarily landed. Each time, I watch her name flash on the screen until it goes dark again. I sit cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by the pitiful collection of belongings I gathered from my bedroom at my parents' house, the house where I've lived my entire 30 years. The house I no longer have any right to enter without permission. My laptop, 3 changes of clothes, a photo album from before Hallie, my grandmother's recipe box. Nothing else seemed truly mine. They made me her mother. Then they erased me. The thought comes unbidden, sharp as broken glass. I press my palms against my eyes until colors explode behind my eyelids. Practical concerns press in. I have 2 weeks' worth of savings. The grocery store where I work part-time won't cover rent anywhere in this town. Sandra's hospitality has an expiration date. Her boyfriend moves in next month. I open the small suitcase I borrowed from Sandra and begin folding the clothes I brought, though there's no real need for such care. My fingers brush against the hard edge of a picture frame at the bottom. I lifted out a snapshot from Hallie's 10th birthday. She's blowing out candles on a cake I baked at dawn before my shift, her face turned slightly toward me, not the camera. My arm is around her shoulders, and we're both laughing. I trace the outline of our faces, then tuck only this photo into my purse. The rest of the family pictures remain in the suitcase. In the kitchen, Sandra opens a bottle of wine. You can stay as long as you need, she lies kindly. I nod, knowing I'll be gone before she has to ask. A week passes like water through cupped hands. I return to the house no longer my home to collect the few remaining items I'd left behind. The key feels foreign in my grip as I unlock the front door, half expecting someone to stop me, to tell me I no longer belong. The house breathes silence. Hallie is at school, and I'm grateful for the empty rooms, as I make my way upstairs to gather the last of my belongings. In my old bedroom, I pull open the closet door and reach for a box of winter clothes on the top shelf. My fingers brush against something else, a thick manila envelope wedged against the wall. Curious, I tug it free, sending a spray of dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. The envelope is unmarked, sealed with a faded rubber band. Inside, I find a stack of letters, their corners softened with age. The first bears the emblem of State University, my dream school. I slide my finger beneath the flap, heart suddenly racing. Dear Miss Cantwell, we are pleased to offer you admission to our undergraduate program with a full academic scholarship. The date, 8 years ago. My legs give way and I sink to the floor, letters scattered around me like fallen leaves. Another envelope from Westridge College. A third from Lakeside Arts Institute. All with the same message: acceptance, scholarships, opportunities. All unopened until this moment. Between the pages of one letter, I find a yellow sticky note in my mother's handwriting. Hallie's too young to be without you. The air vanishes from my lungs as though I've been struck. I press my hand against my chest, feeling the violent thud of my heart against my palm. They knew. They intercepted my acceptance letters, deliberately keeping me from my future, ensuring I'd remain their unpaid caregiver. I sit motionless, dust particles swirling around me in the shaft of sunlight, the physical evidence of their betrayal warming in my trembling hands. 3 days later, I'm scanning groceries at Miller's Market, the steady beep of the scanner matching the dull rhythm of my thoughts. 8 hours into a 10-hour shift, my feet throb in shoes not designed for concrete floors. Paper or plastic? I ask without looking up. Nerys? My head snaps up at the sound of Hallie's voice. She stands on the other side of the register, a small basket of items clutched in her hands. Her eyes are puffy, dark circles beneath them that mirror my own. Why did you move out? She asks, her voice small. Why aren't you answering my calls? I glance at Mr. Miller hovering near the customer service desk, his eyes fixed on our exchange. I can't afford to make a scene, can't risk this job that barely keeps me afloat. Next customer, please. I say mechanically, reaching for the first item in her basket. Talk to me, Hallie pleads as I scan a box of cereal. I don't understand what's happening. I'm just respecting Mom and Dad's wishes. The words taste bitter on my tongue, but they told me. Her voice cracks. They said you'd always take care of me. I pause, a can of soup suspended between us. They said you promised to stay with me until I finished college. Tears spill down her cheeks. Was that a lie? The scanner beeps, shattering the moment. I finish ringing up her items, aware of Mr. Miller's watchful gaze, of the customers shifting impatiently behind Hallie. That'll be $27.58, I say, avoiding her eyes. At night, I lie awake on Sandra's couch, staring at the ceiling. 2 more weeks before her boyfriend moves in, and I need to be gone. My paycheck barely covers food and bus fare, with nothing left for deposits on an apartment. What little savings I had went to my portion of our parents' funeral expenses. I insisted on sharing despite Attorney Wallace's suggestion that the estate could cover everything. Tomorrow is payday, but after rent to Sandra I'll have $212 to my name. Not enough for first and last month's rent anywhere, not even in the shabby apartments on the east side of town. I roll onto my side, pulling the thin blanket tighter around my shoulders. The apartment goes quiet after Sandra turns off her television, leaving me alone with thoughts that circle like hungry wolves. The discovered scholarship letters taunt me from my backpack. Education paths permanently altered, dreams deferred until they withered. Years spent raising someone else's child instead of building my own life have left me with a fragmented work history and few marketable skills beyond stocking shelves and scanning groceries. A terrible thought surfaces from the dark waters of my mind. What if they were right? What if I am nothing without being her caretaker? I press my face into the cushion, but it doesn't muffle the sob that escapes me. The following Tuesday, Sandra accompanies me to view a tiny studio apartment above a laundromat. The space smells of fabric softener and has a shower with questionable water pressure, but the rent is manageable if I pick up extra shifts. I'll co-sign, Sandra says when the landlord mentions the credit check. I stare at her. You can't, if I can't make rent? Then you'll tell me, and we'll figure it out. She signs her name beside mine, a gesture so casual yet so profound I have to look away to hide my tears. That evening, as I unpack my few belongings in the tiny studio apartment. I wonder if I'm doing the right thing by keeping the truth from Hallie. Would telling her about the will only hurt her more? Or is my silence protecting the parents who failed us both? What would you do when the truth might damage the one relationship you still care about? I place the photo of Hallie and me on the windowsill, the only decoration in a room furnished with Sandra's cast-offs and thrift store finds. Outside, dusk settles over the street, people hurrying home to families and lives with foundations more secure than mine. The discovered letters remain in my backpack, evidence of a future that was never allowed to bloom. 3 days later, the phone rings for the third time today. Attorney Wallace's number flashes on the screen, persistent as a debt collector. I let it go to voicemail again. Miss Cantwell, please return my call. Hallie is struggling with the house management and bills. She needs your guidance. My thumb hovers over the delete button. Of course she's struggling. She's 17. She shouldn't have to manage a mortgage and utility bills while finishing high school. But apparently, that's what our parents wanted. The voicemail from Hallie's school counselor is worse. Miss Cantwell, I'm concerned about Hallie's academic performance. Her grades are dropping significantly, and she's missed several college application deadlines. Given your parents' emphasis on her education, I thought you should know. I press my forehead against the cool plaster wall of my tiny studio apartment. The irony burns like acid. The calls keep coming. Family friends I've known since childhood, their voices tight with judgment. How could you abandon her after everything? Mrs. Reeves asks, not bothering with hello. Your parents would be devastated. Even Pastor Miller appears at the grocery store during my shift, cornering me by the time clock. The congregation is concerned. He says, his voice low as my coworkers pretend not to listen. Family is a sacred responsibility, Nerys. My manager, Dale, calls me into his cramped office the next day. He doesn't look at me as he shuffles papers on his desk. I'm cutting your hours, he says, until you sort out your personal problems. Customers don't need the drama. Cutting this tacket. I don't argue. What would be the point? 25 hours becomes 15, and my next paycheck won't cover rent. That night, I divide a single packet of ramen into 2 meals, saving half for tomorrow's lunch. The scale in the apartment's shared bathroom confirms what my loosening clothes have been telling me: 15 pounds gone in a month. My face in the mirror belongs to a stranger, hollowed out beneath the cheekbones. When my car breaks down timing belt, the mechanic says, $800. I start walking the 3 miles to work. In the dark, in the rain, in whatever shoes don't have holes yet. My hands, once soft from the scented lotions Mom bought me every Christmas, grow calloused from kneading dough at midnight. The small batches of cookies and muffins I sell to coworkers bring in just enough to keep the electricity on. I package them in dollar store containers, each one decorated with a handwritten note that takes more energy than I can spare. The nightmares are the worst. I watch the accident happen over and over, a scene I never witnessed in real life, constructed entirely by my subconscious. The headlights, the skid, Mom's scream, Dad's futile attempt to swerve. I wake gasping, convinced for one terrible moment that I could have prevented it somehow. My second job application goes into a file folder with the others: convenience store, call center, janitor. Anything to supplement the dwindling grocery store hours. I practice smiling in the bathroom mirror before each interview, hoping the exhaustion doesn't show. You seem overqualified, they say, which means, you seem desperate. They're not wrong. The knock on my door comes early on a Sunday morning. I grab the baseball bat I keep beside the bed. This neighborhood isn't known for its safety, and approach cautiously. Mrs. Patterson stands in the hallway, a covered dish in her weathered hands. She's at least 75, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening as she smiles. Brought you something, she says, holding out the casserole. My sister's recipe. I hesitate, pride warring with hunger. I raised my sister's children after she passed. Mrs. Patterson continues, her voice matter of fact. Nobody ever asked if I was okay. She looks directly into my eyes. So I'm asking you, are you okay, dear? The simple question breaks something loose inside me. I take the casserole, hands trembling, and invite her in for coffee I can't really spare. 2 days later, Sandra texts that some mail has arrived for me at her apartment. I walk there after my shift, feet blistered but moving forward, because standing still isn't an option anymore. Sandra's apartment building comes into view, the familiar brick facade almost painful to see. A month ago, I slept on her couch, surrounded by friends who dropped by with wine and sympathy. Now she's the only one who still calls. The key she gave me turns in the lock. I push open the door and freeze. Hallie sits on the couch, hands clasped in her lap, looking both older and younger than her 17 years. "Sandra, let me in," she says, her voice small. "We need to talk." I set down my purse, suddenly aware of my appearance, unwashed hair, dark circles under my eyes, clothes hanging loose. "You just walked away," Hallie says, her voice cracking. Like I didn't matter. The accusation slices through the last thread of my self-control. "I gave up everything for you." The words erupt from someplace deep and wounded. College, career, relationships, everything. Hallie flinches as if I've struck her. "Do you know what my life looks like now?" I continue, tears streaming down my face. "I can't afford to eat every day. I walk miles to a job where they cut my hours because I'm a problem. My car is dead. I sleep 3 hours a night between nightmares and worry." I sink onto the couch, shaking with the force of finally saying it all aloud. "I love you more than anyone, Hallie," I whisper. "That's why this hurts so much." She reaches for my hand, her own tears falling, and we sit in silence, broken only by the sound of shared grief. Later, as Hallie prepares to leave, Sandra slips me a business card. "Bakery owner," she murmurs. "Looking for an apprentice. I told her about those amazing cinnamon rolls you make." In the doorway, Mrs. Patterson appears, having somehow coordinated with Sandra. "I have a spare room," she says, her tone brooking no argument. "$300 a month, utilities included, until you get back on your feet." I think of the parents' friends bringing casseroles when Mom was sick years ago, of church members organizing meal trains and prayer circles. Those same people now cross the street to avoid me. Yet here are these near strangers, offering not judgment but practical help. I straighten my shoulders as I turn back to Hallie, my voice stronger than it's been in weeks. "I'll meet you at the house tomorrow." I tell her, "There's something you need to see." That night, I pack the discovered college letters into my bag, along with Attorney Wallace's business card. The woman looking back at me from the mirror is thin and tired, but her eyes hold something new resolve. My phone rings as I'm leaving for work the next morning. Hallie's name on the screen. "I found something in the attic today," she says, her voice strange. "Something about the will." "Hi." I step outside into the morning light, ready at last for whatever comes next. The manila folder sits heavy in my hands as I walk up the path to what used to be my home. Maple Street glows amber in the late afternoon sun, the familiar cracked sidewalk where I taught Hallie to ride her bike stretching before me like pages from a book I've read too many times. Hallie opens the door before I knock. Her face is drawn, eyes rimmed with the soft pink of recent tears. "You came," she says, stepping back to let me in. The house smells different. Not quite neglected, but changed as if it knows I don't belong here anymore. I clutch the folder tighter. I said I would. I move past her into the living room where I've spent 30 years of my life. The couch has been moved, angled toward the window instead of the television. One small rebellion. "I have something to show you," I say, sitting at the dining table where our family never quite managed regular dinners together. I open the folder methodically, the way I've practiced with Sandra. Things you should know. I spread the contents like playing cards, college acceptance letters with their congratulatory language still bright despite years hidden in a box. School records showing my absences each time Hallie had been sick. Photographs Mom and Dad never displayed me holding Hallie at her kindergarten graduation while they worked. Me helping with her science projects. Me braiding her hair before school. This was my life. I say, my voice steady, though my fingers tremble slightly against the tabletop. "I missed 63 days of high school my senior year because you had chronic ear infections. I deferred college 4 times. I worked part-time jobs with flexible hours so I could pick you up from school." Hallie stares at the evidence, picking up one photograph after another. "I don't remember this," she whispers, holding a picture of us at the beach, her tiny hand in mine while I taught her to jump waves. "You were 3. I slide a bank statement toward her. "This is my current situation. I have $342 in savings. My job pays $13.25 an hour. I'm renting Mrs. Patterson's spare room for $300 a month, which leaves me about $70 a week for everything else after taxes." Her eyes widen. "But what about..." Mom and Dad's life insurance went to the funeral costs. There wasn't much left. I take a deep breath. I'm not telling you this to hurt you, Hallie. You deserve to know our real story, not the version they wanted everyone to believe. She's silent, tracing her finger over a photograph where I'm helping her with homework, dark circles under my teenage eyes. The doorbell rings, sharp and intrusive. Hallie jumps. But I don't. Some part of me expected this. Attorney Wallace stands on the porch, his gray suit immaculate as always. Hallie called earlier. He says, brushing past me into the house with the confidence of someone who's never been unwelcome. She was concerned about your mental state. My mental state is fine, I say, following him back to the dining room where my evidence lies scattered. He glances at the documents, dismissive. I understand this is difficult, but your parents made their wishes clear. This, he gestures at the photographs, doesn't change anything legally. Actually, Hallie says, her voice stronger than I've heard since the funeral. It might. She crosses to the small desk in the corner and pulls out a folded document from the drawer. I found this in the attic yesterday, when you mentioned meeting me here. She hands it to Wallace, whose professional mask slips for just an instant. The other will, Hallie explains to me. The one that split everything between us, dated 8 months before they died. Wallace adjusts his glasses, clears his throat. This earlier document was superseded by one written just 2 months before the accident, Hallie interrupts. With no proper witnesses, just their signatures and yours. I watch Wallace's face, the slight flush creeping up his neck. I advised against it, he admits finally. The hasty execution. But they insisted Nerys would understand. My laugh sounds hollow even to my own ears. Understand what? That after raising their child, I deserved nothing? When Hallie asks if I want to contest the will, I hesitate. Would fighting for what was rightfully mine heal the wounds or just deepen them? Should I demand justice or find a way forward that preserved the only family I had left? The front door opens again. Sandra walks in without knocking, a tall man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses following her. Tom Alvarez? Sandra introduces him. The paralegal friend I mentioned, specializes in probate law. Wallace straightens his tie. This is a private family matter. Which is why I'm here, Sandra says, sitting beside me. I'm the closest thing to family Nerys has right now. Tom examines both wills, his fingers careful on the paper. The newer version has procedural problems, he says after a few minutes. Improper execution, no disinterested witnesses, and given the circumstances. He glances at my evidence spread across the table. Mrs. Patterson appears in the doorway next, bringing with her Dr. Collins from the hospital where my parents worked. I called James, she says. He saw how your parents treated you, dear. Dr. Collins nods solemnly. They relied on Nerys completely. The hospital offered family counseling twice when we noticed the pattern. They declined. The dining room feels suddenly crowded with allies I didn't know I had. People offering solutions instead of judgment. The probate court will review this, Tom says confidently. Based on the improper execution alone, we have grounds to challenge. Wallace's phone rings. He steps into the hallway to answer, his voice low but urgent. When he returns, his expression has shifted. My office would like to discuss a settlement option, he says carefully, to spare everyone the publicity of a contested will. Sandra squeezes my hand under the table. That evening, 3 people who criticized me at the grocery store last week call to check in and offer support. The church secretary who told me I was being selfish brings a casserole to Mrs. Patterson's house where I'm staying. Hallie finds me there after dinner, clutching a leather-bound book to her chest. I found Mom's journal, she says, her voice small. You should read it. She places it in my hands, her fingers lingering on the cover. It's all about how they couldn't have managed without you, how they never wanted you to know. I open the journal as she walks away, the weight of truth finally shifting from my shoulders to the pages where it belonged all along. On the confrontation day, Attorney Wallace arrives at the community center 10 minutes early, his leather briefcase gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Margaret Jenkins, my parents' closest friend for 20 years, walks beside him, her silver cross necklace catching the light as she surveys the room. Nerys? Wallace nods, setting his papers on the conference table with practiced precision. I've brought a compromise that should put this unfortunate situation behind us. I watch his movements, the careful arrangement of his fountain pen parallel to the edge of the document. My hands remain folded in my lap, steady now after weeks of trembling. A modest settlement, he continues, sliding a document across the polished surface. $15,000. More than fair, considering the circumstances. Margaret leans forward, her perfume, my mother's favorite, wafting between us. Your parents wanted Hallie protected near ice. You know that. Her voice drops to a whisper. They worried constantly about her future. The implication hangs in the air, but never about mine. This way, Wallace adds, tapping the paper, we avoid a lengthy court battle that could deplete the estate significantly. I study the settlement offer without touching it. $15,000. The price they've placed on my 30 years of sacrifice. I understand your frustration, Margaret says, reaching for my hand. I slide mine away before she makes contact. But dragging this through the courts, making these accusations public, you're dishonoring their memory. My throat tightens as she delivers the final blow. Your parents told everyone how you promised to always care for Hallie, how you insisted on it. The door opens behind me. Hallie enters with Sandra and Tom, their footsteps breaking the silence that follows Margaret's words. I reach into my bag and remove my phone. I didn't want to do this, I say, my voice steadier than I expected, but I recorded a conversation with Mom and Dad last year. Wallace straightens, alarm flickering across his face. I press play, and my father's voice fills the room. When Hallie's grown, it'll finally be your turn, Nerys. We promise. My mother's voice follows. You've given up so much. We'll make it right. I stop the recording and pull out a stack of yellowed notes from my mother spanning years. These are promises they made repeatedly. I place them on the table, arranging them in a neat row. Promises to help me go back to school, to support my dreams once Hallie was older. Sandra steps forward, sliding a folder toward Wallace. These are Nerys's financial contributions to the household over the past decade. Rent payments, utility bills, groceries, all from her minimum wage jobs while the Cantwells built their careers. Tom places another document beside it. And this is documentation of the hours Nerys spent raising Hallie while her parents worked, tracked through school pickup logs, medical forms, and parent-teacher conference attendance records. Hallie moves to stand beside me, her shoulder touching mine. We're not fighting each other, she says, her voice breaking slightly. We're fighting for the truth. Wallace examines the documents with forced neutrality, but I catch the slight widening of his eyes. I loved them, I say, gathering strength from Hallie's presence beside me. But love doesn't mean erasing myself. Not anymore. Wallace clears his throat, straightening his tie. The revised will has certain vulnerabilities. The lack of proper witnesses is problematic. 3 days later, the community center fills with familiar faces as the mediation hour approaches. People who once looked at me with disappointment now avert their eyes. A woman I recognize as a reporter from the local paper sits in the corner, notebook ready. Hallie and I walk in together, our shoulders brushing. We take seats at the front table, facing the mediator, a stern woman with kind eyes. Before we begin, I say, opening my folder, I'd like to present an alternative solution. The mediator nods, and I continue, laying out documents Tom helped prepare. We're proposing legal co-ownership of the house and all assets. I explain. Equal division, equal responsibility. A murmur ripples through the room. The reporter's pen scratches rapidly against paper. Hallie sits straighter beside me. My sister sacrificed everything for me. Her voice carries through the room. She was more of a parent to me than they were. Margaret makes a small noise of protest, beginning to rise from her chair. Please let my sister finish, Hallie says, the steel in her voice silencing the older woman immediately. The room grows quiet. People who once shook their heads at me in the grocery store now lean forward, listening. The pastor who suggested I was abandoning my duty now watches with troubled eyes. I speak clearly, my voice neither accusatory nor defensive, just matter of fact. I describe the college opportunities hidden from me, the late nights caring for Hallie, the promises made and broken. I explain how my parents built their reputations as devoted community members while I maintained their home and raised their child. When I finish, the mediator reviews our proposal silently. The room remains hushed, the only sound the steady tick of the wall clock, so different from the hammering timepiece in Wallace's office. 3 weeks later, I stand on the courthouse steps as the clerk hands me the final paperwork. The court has approved our joint petition to invalidate the contested will, reverting to the previous version that divided everything equally between Hallie and me. There's talk? Sandra tells me later over coffee. People are questioning everything they thought they knew about your parents. I nod, unsurprised. Community pillars can crumble quickly when their foundations are revealed to be built on someone else's sacrifice. Have you decided? Hallie asks that evening as we sort through kitchen cabinets. About moving back? I run my fingers along the familiar countertop where I taught her to bake cookies, where I helped with science projects, where I prepared countless meals while my parents worked late. I don't know yet. I admit. Hallie disappears upstairs, returning moments later with a dusty cardboard box. The label, written in my teenage handwriting, reads, Nerice's Dreams. I found this in the attic, she says, placing it gently before me. I think it's time to open it again. Morning sunlight streams through the bakery windows, catching the flour dust dancing in the air as I fold melted butter into pastry dough. Mr. Donovan nods approvingly at my technique. You've got a natural talent, Nerice. These will sell out before noon. I smile, allowing myself to savor the compliment rather than deflecting it. 6 months of apprenticeship have taught me more than just baking. They've taught me to recognize my own worth. Later, as I pipe rosettes onto a birthday cake, my phone buzzes with Hallie's text. Financial meeting still on for tonight? I respond with a thumbs-up emoji. Our weekly budget sessions have become a ritual, me teaching Hallie to manage the rental income from the upstairs apartment, her teaching me to stop hovering over every decision she makes. The money isn't much, but it's enough to supplement my bakery wages while allowing Hallie to focus on her senior year without working full-time. Back home, I tape my class schedule to the refrigerator door, right where our parents' rules and expectations once hung. Business management on Tuesdays and Thursdays, entrepreneurship on Wednesdays. The scholarship isn't full, but it's enough. I trace my finger over the neat rows of times and dates, concrete evidence of promises I've finally kept to myself. Your transcript came today, Hallie announces, waving an envelope as she walks into the kitchen. And I finished my essay for Northwestern. I wash flour from my hands, my stomach tightening with an old, familiar anxiety. College applications. The season of waiting, hoping, planning that I never experienced for myself. Want me to look it over? I ask, careful to keep my tone light. Please, but only if you have time. Hallie spreads her essay on the kitchen table. The interview's next week. I sit beside her, but not before grabbing my planner. I can help tonight, but I've got study group tomorrow, and Saturday is that bakery showcase. The words feel foreign but wonderful in my mouth boundaries, clearly stated. Not apologies disguised as explanations. I know your schedule, Hallie says, rolling her eyes but smiling. I'm not expecting you to drop everything. I'm not mom and dad. We work through her essay, side by side in the kitchen, where I once cut her sandwiches into stars because the extra effort made her eat when nothing else would. Same situation, different approach. I'm here because I choose to be, not because I have to be. Later that week, Sandra and Tom arrive early for the bakery showcase, helping me arrange display stands for my signature lavender shortbread and lemon tarts. Mrs. Patterson brings a handmade sign, Nini's Treats. Using the nickname only Hallie was allowed to call me as a child. To family we choose and boundaries we respect. Tom toasts with sparkling cider, his arm around Sandra's waist. Our neighbors from down the street, the ones who know our real story, not our parents' version, clap and cheer as Mr. Donovan announces my promotion to assistant baker. The following week after the showcase, on Sunday, Hallie holds the ladder steady, while I hang the sign above our renovated garage, Nini's Table Baked with Love. Below it, a smaller plaque reads, Est, 2025 Ampere Cantwell Sisters Venture. You still sure about me working weekends when I'm home from college? Hallie asks, squinting up at me. The business plan accounts for it, I answer, climbing down. Besides, the rental income covers most of your tuition. I stand back to admire our work, the converted garage that will become my first professional kitchen once I complete my degree next year. The sound of Hallie's laughter drifts across the yard as she texts photos to Sandra and Tom. As I put the finishing touches on my first professional kitchen, I wonder, is forgiveness always necessary for healing? Can we honor the complicated truth of those we've lost while still protecting our own hearts? What would you choose? The comfort of a simpler story, or the freedom of an honest one.